Thank you so much. My name's Melissa Rosen. I am the Director of Training and Education at Sharsheret, and thank you for hopping on to listen. As for tonight, you may be listening simply to learn more. You may have been asked to speak on behalf of Sharsheret. Maybe you're thinking of becoming a peer supporter or considering trying to plan an educational program in your community. Over the past few years, the number of speaker requests has been growing that Sharsheret receives each week. We have such a talented group of people committed to Sharsheret who have been asking to do more. So a training like this just made sense. The shift from just a speaker training to an ambassador training. This is actually our third or fourth ambassador training, but we've been doing these types of training, something similar, for more than 7 years. So tonight tonight will be helpful for anyone interested speaking to raise awareness or support those who are impacted by breast cancer or ovarian cancer, as well as those who are just interested in learning about different ways to raise awareness. So you can see on the screen tonight's agenda and just how important it is to be an ambassador, how to represent Sharsheret, how to share your story. We are going to include some public speaking goals and tips, and definitely some additional ways to support Sharsheret, and a little bit more. So let's move on. Let's talk about goals for being an ambassador. There are lots of reasons. We want to educate about breast cancer, ovarian cancer, maybe some other cancers, and heightened risk. We want to raise that awareness about heightened risk and encourage people to become proactive about their health. We definitely want to share Sharsheret as a source of support. Wow, that is a lot of S words and a tongue twister, but we do. We want to share Sharsheret as a source of support. And anything we do, we talk, people come on and say, oh, I'm not a fundraiser, and that's fine because that's not something you have to do for Sharsheret. But friend raising and fundraising sometimes go hand in hand, but everybody on the screen tonight will be engaged in friend raising. That is for sure.
Hi, I'm Amy Sachs, Sharsharet's support program coordinator out here in California. If everybody wants to put in the chat where you're joining from tonight, we love to know and share. We're all over the country and even some international participants too, hopefully. So, basically, it's important for you all to understand, what we do. And I would assume that because you're here, you know a lot about what we do already. But I also want to say that becoming an ambassador doesn't mean that you need to memorize everything that Melissa and I are going to share tonight. So, here you can see, our mission statement, which is to improve the lives of Jewish women and families living with or at increased genetic risk for breast cancer or ovarian cancer through personalized support, and saves lives through educational outreach. So we do kind of function as almost two different organizations, one providing this, education and outreach, one providing emotional support to not only the people who are diagnosed or at risk, but also the people who care about them. We use the term caregivers very loosely here. So anybody who cares about somebody going through a diagnosis or even just going through genetic testing or, thinking about their risk, we're here for anybody affected by these diagnoses. And I think the most important thing to remember is that, of course, our expertise is in, young women and Jewish families, but we are absolutely here for everybody, regardless of age, regardless of background, regardless of any part of their selves, right? We are really here for everybody. So, you don't have to only refer people who fall into one of those buckets. You can always share with anybody who could use our free support. And then it's important to also remember everything we do is free. Everything we do is customized, and everything we do is confidential through our team of social workers and genetic counselors. So again, this is a slide that I think can intimidate some people who are getting ready to share their story for the first time or speak at an event for the first time. We do not expect you to memorize these stats. They're good for you to be familiar with, of course, especially because they might be stats you might want to share with your healthcare providers. But these are not things that we expect you to memorize. So, it is kind of stunning to look and see that 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer, but that is over the course of their lifetime. So that can sound really alarmist when, you're speaking to people in their 30s, 40s, even 50s. That doesn't necessarily apply to them at that age. It's, over the course of their lifetime. The risk of ovarian cancer is smaller, so it is a more rare diagnosis, but we are absolutely here for people facing that diagnosis, as well as, men are at risk for these cancers. And while you'll see a lot of pink at Sharsheret, we are not just here for women. We are not just a women's organization. We're absolutely here for men as well. And, certainly when we're talking about that BRCA gene mutation, which we are as Jews, especially as Ashkenazi Jews, at so much greater risk. It's 1 in 400 in the general population and 1 in 40 in Ashkenazi Jews. That risk is equal for men and women, right? It's a 50% chance that parents will pass it down if they carry that gene mutation to both their sons and daughters. And, but it's also when we get talking about these genetic mutations, I do think it's really important to remind everybody that only 10 to 20% of breast and ovarian cancers are hereditary. So while it seems like certain families are passing things down, a lot of these cancers just happen. And again, these genetic mutations are associated with different types of cancer. So, these are our area of expertise, but if somebody calls us with a different type of cancer, we're not going to hang up the phone on them. We're still going to share lots of resources. They might not qualify for our financial assistance programs, but they will qualify for support from a social worker, support from a genetic counselor, and lots of our kits as well. So one really important note is to remember that, cancer is not just a physical experience, right? So if you're sharing your story on our behalf, you're going to talk about doctor's visits and surgeries and, what happened to your body, right? But you're also going to talk about the emotional impact of this and the spiritual impact of this. And it's really important to remember that sharing that part of yourself can be really triggering. So even when you're becoming an ambassador or helping others and sharing, on behalf of Sharsheret, we're still here for you because we know that even when you're helping us and helping others, you might still need that help too. So it's not one or the other. You're not on one side of this or on the other. We're here for you. We know that whether it's, talking about your story or having people come up to you after you share your story and sharing theirs, or even, things that happen in the news, right? Hearing about famous people who are diagnosed or, things like that, or even watching a movie that you think is just going to be fun. And then, oh, now somebody's diagnosed with cancer in this movie I'm using to, take my mind off of it. Anything can kind of be a trigger. So we're still here for you because we know there are studies out there that show that patients whose non-medical needs are met have better medical outcomes. So when the whole person is supported, not just their medical needs, but their emotional needs, their spiritual needs are met, they're actually going to have a better prognosis. So that's what we're here for. We're here to help meet those psychosocial needs.
Okay, so let's talk for a second about why we might help others, why we might do that by sharing something intensely personal. So yes, sharing your story can help others, but what people may not realize until they've done it is sharing your story with others can also be really a cathartic experience, helping you process and helping you realize things you may not have realized, or maybe putting a part of your life to bed, or whatever it is. It tends to be cathartic when we do it. And I think what's important as some of us are getting ready to share our story is a reminder that you control what you share. That is incredibly important. We're going to talk about that a little more in a second. When you're sharing your story, basically we're talking about just a few things. Introduce yourself, talk about what happened, what helped, how you are different because of the experience, and then make your ask or offer. And we're going to go through each of these. And so when you share your story, your connection to cancer, it really just as a reminder is truly sharing a piece of yourself with another person, or if you're speaking, an entire audience. Just because you're doing it for an important reason doesn't mean it won't necessarily be emotional. And that's important to prepare for. Again, you control what you share. You have the prerogative to share what you'd like to and keep other parts private. Remember the reasons that you are sharing, and why those are important to you. So, for instance, you could share all about a cancer experience, but not reveal you carry a genetic mutation if you want. You could share about your cancer experience and somebody asks you how your children dealt with it. And you can very clearly draw that boundary and say, I don't talk about my children. That's their experience to share, should they ever choose to share it. Many other things. And even if you've started a conversation and then it feels like it doesn't feel right, you can draw that barrier then too. Remember, when you're speaking to a group in particular, the best way to share your experience is not by sharing or oversharing details, right? So someone might want to know that a person has been diagnosed with estrogen receptor positive stage 2 breast cancer. But they don't need to know the details of any genomic testing, or they don't need to know exactly what type of treatment you're on, the details of it, or how you reacted to that treatment. Like, the nitty gritty isn't what helps people, unless you're having a one-on-one conversation and a person is learning, this is the kind of treatment I've been, prescribed. Is it what you got? One-on-one is very different, but when you're talking to a big group, those details don't matter. What matters again is, the very basics of what happened, how you felt during it. Because remember, Amy said just a slide or two ago, cancer is not just a physical experience. It's emotional. It can be spiritual. So how you felt during it.
And also how others made you feel. So often
So
we're
important.
sharing our story with people who are more likely to be caregivers. They're more likely to be friends of somebody diagnosed, right? So
Yeah.
really being able to share, what should their takeaway be? How can they help somebody based on how people either helped you or let you down, right? And not getting too deep into that. But those can really be the most emotionally impactful things to share. And I just want to go back to something Melissa said, which is like, don't be surprised if you're emotional, like kind of be prepared for that. And I would go a step farther and say, sometimes when preparing for their first time speaking, somebody says to me, I'm so worried I'm going to cry. And I say to them, it's okay if you do. We don't want you heaving and sobbing up there in front of everybody, but if you get a little teary, if you get a little emotional, a little choked up, it can be incredibly powerful and really tug on people's heartstrings in a way that is going to help them remember what you said a little bit more. So
Yeah.
just had to share that.
No, that's great. That's great. Okay, so we've talked about introducing yourself and the parameters of sharing what happened. Then the thing I think, and this is exactly like doubling down on what Amy just said, like what helped? And we're not really necessarily talking about what helped physical ailments, reactions to treatment, things like that, but what helped you emotionally, right? This is how you're setting people up to help people in the community who want to support someone who is facing cancer, because the audience may be able to use your experience to help someone they know going through a similar experience. And then, how are you different now? How might cancer have changed you now that you're on the other side of active treatment or not? And then the big finale is make your ask, right? And the types of asks we're talking about here are really getting people to be proactive, especially when you're talking to a group about their health, right? So what could they do? They could learn about their family's cancer history. You could ask them, if you've been putting off your mammogram, promise me this week you're going to schedule your mammogram. Or to live more healthfully, whether that means, exercising or eating well or things like that. Those are the kind of asks we're talking about usually when we speak to a group. Excuse me, if you are talking to someone one-on-one, the ask can be as simple as, please reach out to me and let me know if you need anything else or something like that. Right? Because the ask and the offer is the same. Another type of ask might be to get involved with Sharsheret in some manner, right? That's important. Asking people to check out our website or attend an upcoming webinar or one of our wonderful gala events or something like that. It just depends on the time of year, right? If you're speaking, let us know. We'll tell you what's coming up in the area you're speaking, and maybe you can even talk about a particular program. So, right, we want people to be proactive about their health. We want them to be familiar enough with Sharsheret so that if they learn someone they know is dealing with a diagnosis, that they can say, have you heard of Sharsheret? This is an amazing organization that you should reach out to. And then if we're talking now about talking and not other ambassador behaviors or opportunities, I just want to remind you that nervous is normal, right? Don't expect perfection because your audience doesn't. They may not even notice. It's perfectly acceptable to stutter or trip over a word because that's what the average person speaks like. Just keep moving with grace and pause, and it will be absolutely fine. Right? Don't always expect eloquence when sharing with another individual. You're sharing for an important reason, but again, that doesn't mean you won't misremember something or say something that you'll regret. Don't Shuli, can you see if you can shut that feature off? I see somebody's accidentally writing on the slides. Don't equate public speaking or difficult conversations with self-worth. I think this is very important. Don't worry if this isn't the thing you're most talented at. You're not doing it because you're a beautiful orator. You're doing it because you know you can have an impact. People will simply appreciate your willingness to share. They'll be grateful you made the effort. Let's talk about reflection or prep or practice because those things are key. We've all seen talented public speakers attempt to wing it and fail. No matter how experienced of a public speaker you are or how familiar you are with the topic, jot at least an outline down. Even if you're planning for a conversation rather than a presentation, take time ahead of it to think about what you're comfortable sharing, any points you want to bring up. Okay, let's talk about being nervous because that is simply horrible, right? I think what we try to do is not compound our anxiety, but turn nervousness into excitement. Nervousness is actually simply just adrenaline flowing. It's a form of energy. And so nervousness and excitement are actually very similar emotions. What I can tell you is that you'll be very unlikely to change feelings of nervousness into feelings of calm. But it's actually pretty easy to turn feelings of nervousness into feelings of excitement because they are so similar. Speaking a little louder allows you to express passion for a topic. Before you start speaking, you can actually say to yourself, I'm excited about this. I'm excited about what I'm doing. It reframes those feelings. And let's talk about goals for public speaking. Very similar to goals for becoming a Sharsheret Ambassador. We want to educate about breast and ovarian cancers, raise awareness about heightened risk in our community, and inspire the audience to make healthy life changes. We want to inform people about the free and culturally meaningful resources that Sharsheret provides to those facing a heightened risk or are impacted by cancer before a diagnosis, during a diagnostic period and treatment, if a diagnosis turns into advanced or metastatic cancer, and into survivorship, both short and long term. And that, again, as Amy said, is no matter their relationship to Judaism. As speakers, I want you to keep in mind that you have your own goals, right? Maybe one of your goals is to give back to the community or to help process your own experience. Maybe you're speaking or volunteering to honor someone you know who's faced cancer. And these goals are just as valuable and just as legitimate as all of the ones that we've mentioned previously, right? Helping people become healthy, helping them raise their awareness about cancer risk and about Sharsheret. Your personal goals are just as important. Okay, many people find public speaking scary. People believe that you either can or cannot, but you can work to become a comfortable public speaker. And we'll begin with a few tips and exercises to help with that fear or simply to up your game. So the first is preparation, right? You need to decide if you're just going to take notes or if you're going to write your speech out word for word. Ideally, you'll want to use notes, so your presentation will seem very conversational, but every person is different and you have to do what works for you. If you decide to write out your presentation in a scripted manner, remember to look up and look around as you're speaking. Do it frequently and keep your finger in place so when you look back down, you'll know exactly where you are meant to continue. And it doesn't matter if you just look up and look around. You can even, if you don't want to look at individual people, you're afraid that might make you nervous, focus on something in the back of the room. People won't be able to tell the difference. Their perspective doesn't allow that. Number two is practice. Practice with yourself, with a partner, a friend, or practice with Sharsheret. One of the things that many of us do is help people craft their presentations. People will send us either the written presentation or notes, and we'll suggest things to include or things that are unnecessary. Maybe we'll help them frame something in a more comfortable, accessible way. We're happy to do that for you. Okay. Let's talk about what happens when you're actually speaking. So the first thing to remember is that the average adult has an attention span of no more than 10 to 12 minutes. So we're talking about keeping it short, right? Nobody's asking you to go up and speak for 20 or 30 minutes. That should never happen. Very often when we have someone speak on a program, we tell them 5 to 7 minutes or 3 to 5 minutes, just depending on what the program is. The most effective presenters connect with their audience. So you are sharing about something deeply, deeply personal, something you care deeply about, and that makes connecting easier. So here are some ways to do that. Eye contact. Be sure to look at spots around the room. Again, it doesn't have to be at people if that is too nerve-wracking, but just different areas of the room. Sometimes people will tell you not to use your hands when you talk. You can probably see tonight, I use my hands quite a bit, and I think that that's absolutely fine. You can begin by asking a question. When I go out into communities and speak, I almost always start with a question. How many of you have heard of Sharsheret before? Or how many of you know someone facing cancer? Speak conversationally and with intonation. Speak loudly, clearly, and slowly. In fact, I'm going to remind you to speak so slowly that it actually sounds odd to you because people race through. They tend to race through their presentation, particularly if someone is nervous, and speaking slowly is incredibly important. You know, I find that having in mind that this is just a conversation, one that you happen to be dominating, but just a conversation, don't think of it as a formal presentation, actually helps a great deal. And I just want to finish this slide with talking about a Q&A, or questions and answer session. Sometimes people are afraid of the questions they'll get, but it's actually a great way to connect and perhaps to connect people to Sharsheret. So here's some advice. First of all, one of the most important things to remember is that Sharsheret gives no medical advice, right? We're not doctors. We don't give, in addition to not giving medical advice, we don't give recommendations for specific treatments or specific healthcare providers or anything like that. And if somebody asks, you can simply say, that's not something Sharsheret does. But we can connect people to peer supporters to hear the details of someone's experience, not to receive recommendations, but just to get a perspective. And Sharsheret does partner with a service that can make doctor recommendations. And if someone's interested, they should just contact our clinical team. And if somebody is looking for additional opinions, they should consider, or additional information, they should consider a second opinion. It's okay when somebody asks you a question to say, I don't know the answer to that. If you're unsure, simply say that. I've done this myself. Remind the audience that Sharsheret staff members are available to answer many questions. Share our contact information if appropriate, and depending on what type of presentation you're giving, you can say, like, I can call, tomorrow I can call Sharsheret, try and get the answer to your question, and if you're comfortable leaving me contact information, I can get back to you, or I can, with your permission, introduce you to someone who would have that answer.
I would actually go a step further. Melissa said, you said that it's okay to say, I don't know. I would say it's great to say, I don't know. We don't want you trying to answer questions that you don't know the answers to. And even sometimes, I know people who love me, and so they love Sharsheret, and I have heard them answer questions about Sharsheret that are absolutely 1,000% incorrect. So if you're at all thinking, I think this is the right answer, but I'm not sure, then please say that and say, I would love to get your contact information so that I can have somebody from Sharsheret answer your question, and if they don't want to give their contact information, then, absolutely to tell us so that we can see, how to get the answer to them some other way, through our contacts at, wherever you're speaking, because you don't need to know the answers. That's our job.
Right. Thank you for that. Okay, so The one of the last things I wanted to say for this slide is sometimes people will be much more comfortable asking a question in private. And there could be many reasons to do that. I always tell the audience that I will stay after the presentation for anybody who would rather speak in a less public forum. And then the last reminder is, remember that if someone shares information with you, that information isn't meant to be shared with anyone, not with friends, not with a rabbi if you're speaking in a synagogue, not with anyone. Even if they shared it in a public forum, it's really limited to the people who were in attendance. If you're upset about something you've heard, you can certainly reach out to your contact at Sharsheret to go over that, but it's not to share the information that came from a particular person. It's just, I was at this event and this was said, and I just kind of want to talk through it. Okay, we're going to talk about the anatomy of a great speech. Introduce yourself. I'm going to emphasize one more time, it is your choice what to share. Remember that you can set those boundaries. And however you introduce yourself, are you a synagogue member, an employee of a particular company that you're speaking at, a Sharsheret volunteer, a survivor, a cancer mutations carrier, a caregiver, something else? You develop who you know what you're going to say and who you are. We talked about developing a great opening. One of those ways was asking questions. Another is sharing a statistic or fact. Did you know that 1 in 8 women over the course of their lifetime will develop breast cancer? Or did you know that you could actually take simple, concrete steps that can lower your risk for a cancer diagnosis? I also think people find it very helpful to know what to anticipate. So just like at the beginning of this training, there was a slide for tonight's agenda. Share what you plan to say, like I did that at the beginning of the webinar. And now it's time for the meat of your presentation. Depending on what your group requested, you might be introducing a topic such as genetics or caring for a community member who's been diagnosed. But more likely, you're sharing your story and maybe a brief Sharsheret overview. And of course, you'll be like I said, you'll be educating people about Sharsheret. It's very helpful to make the audience a part of the story. How you decide to do this is up to you. You could ask questions, you could ask people to raise their hand or share examples. Again, it really depends on the situation you're in. You could talk, still on this topic, you could talk about what they might do this week after your presentation. Are they going to take a walk, schedule a mammogram, eat well, visit a friend impacted by cancer? Are they going to get involved with Sharsheret, whether it's Team Sharsheret or checking out our website or ordering Purim cards, which went on sale this week, I believe. Whatever it is, you know, we're asking them to make a commitment to something, and then help them envision how they might become a part of that story. Remember that not all Sharsheret stories start with a cancer diagnosis. We have so many people involved because this issue is just important to them, because they find Sharsheret to be an incredibly valuable organization. And so someone doesn't need to be directly impacted by a cancer, breast cancer, ovarian, by carrying a mutation, to be involved with this amazing organization.
I want to go back to one thing on this slide about including Sharsheret. I think sometimes, you know, it's very common that people come to Sharsheret, like Melissa said, without their own cancer story or long after their cancer treatment is over. And so they feel like, well, I don't know how to include Sharsheret because I didn't call, I didn't get a peer supporter, I didn't get, you know, the newly diagnosed packet, right? I didn't get the mastectomy kit. And that is, you know, if that's true, we don't want you to make up some Sharsheret story, right? what we want is you to be authentic about your connection to Sharsheret. And usually, if you didn't utilize our services in the more traditional ways, right, by calling the second you get your diagnosis or, before treatment or before surgery or things like that, then we want you to kind of think about what that would have been like, what you could have gotten out of it, or what makes you feel passionate about us, right? And so sometimes I've heard people say, I wasn't ready to call Sharsheret when I went through it, but now that I know they send out mastectomy kits and they send out busy boxes to children and things like that, I know that it could have been helpful to me, or now I've become a peer supporter so I can help others and share my story and whatever it is for you. So, and one thing I was gonna say on I think it was maybe the last slide that I was so wrapped up listening to Melissa, I forgot to interrupt, is that, we're giving a lot of advice tonight, but I want everybody on this call to know that if you do get asked to share your story at an event, you're not on your own to remember all of this advice and prepare yourself, all by yourself. Both Melissa and I are here, as well as whoever at Sharsheret is working on you on this event with you. So, I often schedule calls with people to help them write their speech, and then, or maybe they write their speech and they send it to me for advice, or they call me and they say, okay, here's my speech. I want to practice it for you. Like, we are happy to work on this and to support you in whatever way is helpful to you. Okay.
Absolutely. So you just said, one of the things you just said makes me think of something else. You said sometimes people, you can say, like, I just wasn't ready to call when I was going through it. Another thing we hear a lot of is, I didn't realize how much Sharsheret did, and frankly, I didn't want to take support away from someone who needed it more than me. This is a great time to remind people that needed it more is not really the way we do this. It's not a phrase we use. Sharsheret is for everybody. Somebody who is was financially solid before and even now during a cancer diagnosis. Somebody who was struggling before a cancer diagnosis. Somebody who has a lot of support at home. Somebody who has very little support at home. Somebody who's insured, underinsured, not insured, right? It's for everybody. There are lots of different types of support, and Sharsheret does a bit of everything,
Well,
and so it's for everybody, and nobody should ever
absolutely.
feel like you're taking away from someone else by
It's such
calling.
a good point, Melissa. And I often say this to Sharsheret callers who are saying, oh, don't worry about it. Or, yeah, I'd like a family focus packet for both my sister and my mom, but save it for somebody, else they can share. And I always say, like, no, I want to send two. They both deserve their own. And just to peel back the curtain of how nonprofits work, the more of these kits or the more of these calls that we have, the more we can report to our funders how many people we're helping, and then they're more likely to give us more funding to help more people, next time the funding comes around. So you're actually helping Sharsheret by utilizing our services.
Okay.
So we've, alluded to a lot of these and mentioned a lot of these, but I really want to highlight some of the different ambassador opportunities. And just know that even if you don't do, all these things on the list or any of the things on the list, by coming here tonight, you are already a Sharsheret ambassador. By knowing about us and ever, mentioning us or sharing us or liking our, posts, you are a Sharsheret ambassador already. So here are some of the ways. And then, we are always interested in hearing more ideas from you. So, certainly becoming a peer supporter is a huge way to help, and to become a link in the chain of Sharsheret. Sharing your healthcare providers with us is really important. Very often, we have somebody call and say, hey, I'm considering this doctor. Do you have anybody who's used them? So it's not quite a referral service, but it's as close as that we'll get. And so, basically what we would do is we would look in our system and see, do we have anybody that utilized that doctor before? And if you're it, then we'll reach out to you and say, hey, this person's considering your doctor. Would you talk to them about what your experience was like? we only want you sharing doctors that you would recommend, and not just doctors, therapists, physical therapists, dietitians, really anybody who was part of your treatment team and helped you, during your experience. Um, letting somebody know about Sharsheret, that's the easiest way. I think a lot of the times to help spread the word about us. Certainly following us on social media, posting about us on social media, sharing our posts to boost our, reach and engagement, is really, really huge, especially as we, gear up for, Melissa will talk about it, but, next month is, the Leashel Pink Day, and we're very excited about that. So, that's our National Day of Outreach and Education, and we'll have lots of really great things for you to post around that. Planning a Sharsheret program is a huge way to help us. Maybe you have your own Mahjong group, or maybe you want to plan a Mahjong event, whether it's at your synagogue or your community center, or, anywhere. Pickleball is very hot right now. I feel like Mahjong and pickleball are like very hot right now. Those are the newer ideas that we've had over the last couple years. I feel like they have taken off like crazy. But we do pink challah bakes and babka bakes and, really whatever you're interested in. We had a kid call and say, I want to do a bake sale. Great, let's do it. It doesn't have to be something that we do often. We want to hear your ideas. What are you passionate about? What is your community passionate about? Maybe you have a workout studio that you love to go to, and you're going to do a pink Pilates or pink workout, for Sharsheret, or pink and teal, to include ovarian cancer and hereditary cancers. And also not everybody loves pink. So pink and teal is even better, I think. Writing a blog for Sharsheret is a huge way to help. Certainly we've talked a lot about sharing your story. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard from a Sharsheret caller that, over the weekend when they, knew they were waiting to hear back from us on Monday, they checked out our blog and they were helped by the stories they read there. And they felt less alone because of the stories they read there. Sharing your story in that way, certainly if you've already written a speech, we can make it a blog post, or if you're waiting for that peer support match, or you're waiting to be chosen to be a speaker, or you're waiting for an event that you're planning in a few months, you can post a blog post for us today, so get in touch with one of us and share your idea for a blog post, and we can share the guidelines for how to write them. They're not that long. Sometimes people are like, oh gosh, I don't know if I can write something long. It's not long. And then, of course, making a donation is lovely. But again, like Melissa said, fundraising is just as, if not more important than fundraising for us. So we have a question. What if the person asks about a doctor who we have heard about is not so great? We would not match you with a doctor. I mean, with somebody asking about a doctor who you don't like, because remember, you're not going to give us their names. And I can't imagine they would be asking about a doctor who you didn't share. But certainly, we don't want you to be dishonest. You can share your experience. You can share what you've heard. Or if you feel uncomfortable, it is always best if you're ever, in a situation with a peer support match where you feel a little out of your depth or a little uncomfortable, to say, you know what, I think that's a better question for your Sharsheret social worker. Just put it back on us, right? We don't ever want you to feel uncomfortable. So here are some of our support programs. Some of them we've mentioned. We've already talked a lot about our peer support network. But I will say that I just got an email earlier today from somebody who said she felt, a little frustrated that she hadn't been matched yet, since she became a peer supporter, a while back. And it's not to say that she hasn't popped up in peer support searches. She probably has. But we have so many peer supporters, and we really match as specifically as possible to the issue someone somebody wants to discuss. So sometimes, we have a bunch of options and we're, looking for that perfect match. And so you might be the second or third option, but option number one, who is like an absolutely perfect match, said yes. Just know that signing up to become a peer supporter is not a big time commitment because of how specifically we match. Um, and then on here, you see a lot of our kits. So we send Best Face Forward kit with makeups and lotions. Everything's paraben and phthalate free to people who are dealing with the cosmetic side effects of treatment. Our Busy Box has toys tailored to the interests and ages of each child in the family under the age of 12, because over 12, they don't play with toys anymore. So for them, we have our teen resources for older kids. Everything for our Embrace community is geared towards people who have a more advanced diagnosis or a stage 4 metastatic diagnosis. So all the same types of kits and resources and support, but tweaked to be really geared towards their experience. We have our Genetics for Life program. We have two amazing genetic counselors who can meet with you one-on-one or on a family conference call, and answer your specific questions about your family history. What should you get tested for if you're considering testing, or if you've already gotten tested, what are the options you might want to consider, and different things like that. We already mentioned our Family Focus program comes with a kit that we send to people who are caring for a loved one. And like I said, it doesn't have to be the typical caregiver, the person in the home with them, or taking them to and from treatment, or caring for them after surgery. It can be somebody who lives across the country or across town, and just a good friend, right? Like, we know that if you are caring about somebody who's going through this, then you're going through it too, in your own way. And we also have lots of phone calls with these, caregivers to help support them as they support the person. So, like right now, I'm helping this one husband. I've never spoken to his wife who has the cancer diagnosis, but I've had multiple calls with the husband. I'm helping the wife through him, and if she feels up to calling one day, I can't wait to talk to her. But, I am happy to be able to support him and her, through him. Our Thriving in Survivorship kit comes with a binder that helps you keep your health records organized, and lots of resources that help deal with, kind of what we were talking about earlier, like the whole person approach, not just the physical, but the emotional and the spiritual as well. And it also comes with exercise bands to help people get active after treatment or stay active during, and a cookbook that's specifically geared towards people going through treatment and beyond. And then, we have lots of additional resources. So, those are our kind of like main kits and programs. But we are, finally, after many, many years, people keep asking us about support groups. And so we are dipping our toe into the waters of the support groups with a new program for people in survivorship. So our first one will be next month. And so we're doing February, March, and April. We'll have 2 days a week, one during the day, one in the evening, geared towards people with an earlier stage diagnosis. And then same thing, one during the day and one during the evening for people with a stage 4 or metastatic diagnosis. So, we're really excited about this. You should have received an email if you received the email about this training. So if you're interested, please, go back and look for that email, or we'll give you our contact info in a few slides so that you can get in touch and learn more. We have Nutrition Education is a fantastic program where we give you access to a one-on-one session with a registered dietitian named Tamar Rothenberg. People rave about her. If you have taken part in one of these sessions, please write in the chat how much you love Tamar, because I have never heard anybody say anything other than that. But she's fantastic and can really answer your specific questions. So if you're interested in that, please get in touch. And then, we've mentioned some of these other things. I will say our YOD program is for people with children ages 18 to 25. We have a peer support matching for those children of somebody diagnosed. And we have specific financial subsidies around certain things. So get
You
in touch
know,
with us if you want more information about that, and definitely a lot of oncofertility education and support.
you know what's not on here? The
Mhm.
waiting room, which is a
Oh,
relatively
yes, we
new
should have
program.
added that. Yes, we have a
Yes.
new program called the Waiting Room. Shuli, I don't know if you can find the link to share in the chat. We did not prepare that, so I'm putting Shuli on the spot. But yes, the Waiting Room is a program that I worked very hard on last year. So thank you, Melissa. It's really geared towards helping you in those moments of unknown. So waiting for your annual scans or waiting for treatment plans to become crystallized, and it's a lot of resources all in this one page on our website that hopefully will be helpful to all of you, whether you're newly diagnosed or way after, for those annual scans.
Yeah, it's a good
Great
program.
catch, Melissa.
Yeah, we have some really amazing new things between those support groups, the nutrition stuff, and the waiting room, and these additional resources are just a handful of the many resources we have. And then we have educational programs. We have trainings such as this, but we have national educational webinars. In the last week, we did one on balancing cancer and work. We did one that really talked about the information that came out of the annual San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium, which is a worldwide research-based breast cancer webinar. So that one really made it into something that the average person could understand about what's coming down the pike in terms of treatments and things like that. We have educational resources. One of the things we talked about earlier was connecting your doctors to us. But another thing you could do is order some of our free educational resources, and we can help you figure out which ones are appropriate and bring those to your doctor's office so they can share them with patients, or to your community center or things like that. And we have different resources for different types of locations and venues, so that it's all really appropriate, including some community education pieces that are not meant for people who have been diagnosed, but just that people should be aware of as they're looking to lower their risk of cancer. So lots of options. And then, of course, we mentioned earlier that we have annually the Leishel Sharsheret Pink Day. And we're going to put a link in the chat right now that is a link to more information about it. But this is really like an educational endeavor. It's where we go into schools and on campuses and in congregations and in workplaces and community centers and people's living rooms. And we do a whole lot of education on a whole lot of topics, including how to be aware of your risk and how to lower it, how to best care for someone in the community who's facing cancer, how to get involved with Sharsheret, and so many more things. And it's a great program that I encourage all of you to check out the link in the chat and see how you might get involved with your community. It's an amazing, literally worldwide effort we do once a year at this time. We have just a couple of minutes left, and because we've learned that questions very often make our speakers nervous, we have some questions that are frequently asked, and we're not going to have time to go through all of them, but let's do a couple of them, and I'll ask them to Amy, or maybe Amy will ask them to me, but let me get started. We hear this all the time. I know someone who was diagnosed. Can I give you their number? What's the answer to a question like that?
So Sharsheret won't reach out to somebody who hasn't reached out to us. So if you get someone's express permission, they say, please have a Sharsheret social worker reach out to me, then you can share their number and their name with us. But we really recommend that you give them the contact information that was put in the chat. Have them reach out to us, because often people will say, oh yeah, I'm gonna call Sharsheret. That's on my to-do list, but they're just telling you that because they don't feel ready to share their story. They're too focused on putting one foot in front of the other, or for whatever reason.
Yeah. Okay. All the time we hear, where are you located? Amy, can you tell us why that doesn't matter?
We are where you are. So, I'm here in Los Angeles,
I'm in
but
New
I talk to
Jersey.
people, yep, but I talk to people all over the states. And like I said, some international callers as well. If I don't know of local resources in their area, I'm gonna do the Googling, to find out some local resources if that's what they're looking for. So, we are everywhere that somebody
Yeah.
might need us.
By and large, our physical offices are administrative only. Our support comes over the phone, through the mail, through texting and emails and chat, conversations like this. So really meant to be everywhere.
Absolutely.
We got a couple of questions as part of registration. And somebody asked, are there any questions that should not be asked of people who have asked for support? So, what I want to say is that's more of a question for our peer support training webinar, which is coming up next month. And you can go onto our website and register right now. That's specifically a deep dive into peer support. But just off the top of my head, I can give you a couple of examples of things that are often not helpful. You know, we hear, what's your prognosis? What are your chances? We don't need to ask that question. It's not our business. I know that I've spoken to several people and myself. People will tell me stories of someone they know that had that same diagnosis that I did, that someone did. The reality is those really aren't relevant. Every person's cancer diagnosis is uniquely their own. Because even if they have the exact same diagnosis and by some chance got the exact same treatment protocols, they may react differently to that medicine. Or they might have more support at home or less support at home. Or, they might have pre-existing conditions that would impact it. So sharing those kind of stories aren't really the way to spend
And
time.
I'd also add, asking questions usually isn't super necessary unless it's how are you feeling, right? And I feel like before I worked here, I would say, let me know if you need anything, or I would say, I would ask, really in-depth questions about somebody's, diagnosis or treatment plan, and it's just not necessary. I'm not one of their doctors, so I don't really need to know. I think curiosity sometimes gets the best of people and we think it's helpful, but really you're the 75th person that this person's had to answer that question to, and it's exhausting, right?
Very
So
exhausting.
what kind of questions? Really any question, I think sometimes. It depends on your relationship with them also. I think sometimes we feel closer to people because we know this private information about them, but we don't actually have the relationship to back that up. So you kind of have to think about that also.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Amy, will you talk to us about what's next?
Yeah, so absolutely, calling us, emailing us, getting in touch to tell us what are you interested in doing, right? So we are going to send a follow-up email with this recording. So you have all of these tips and tricks in your inbox. And you'll also have the survey that has been put in the chat. In that survey, we ask, would you feel comfortable sharing your story? Do you want to share your healthcare providers? Do you want to become a peer supporter if you're not already? So thinking about how you want to get involved and sharing that with us is really the next step. There are some examples on this slide, but just get in touch and let's plan something together.
And our colleague Shuli just put the link to a very brief survey in the chat, just like Amy said. Not only will we get feedback from you about this training, but almost more importantly, if you want to become a peer supporter, there's a place to check. If you want to be on our speakers bureau list, there's a place to check. If you want more information about planning a program, there's a place to check. So that's a very easy way as a next step to get involved.
And
And
I should also say, following us on social media is really, really huge. I know when I go for my, annual mole check and mammograms and things like that, like I post and I say, call Sharsheret if you need more information, but raising awareness about these screenings and these programs and these resources will help the people in your lives.
okay, true to our word, it's been an hour. We're so grateful for the time you've spent with us. Be on the lookout for this recording in a follow-up email, probably very early next week. And please, again, go into the chat and click onto the survey. And we would really be grateful if you did that. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, and we will talk with you soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.